Welcome back to Idle Chit Chat with Marianne.
And Pebbles.
Tonight we're going to talk about
Scott Johnson and Peter Hill.
we live in Bullhead City, Arizona, and this was on Unsolved Mysteries.
And it was on Unsolved Mysteries in 1992. The actual crime, is what they say, was committed in 1974 in April. They were two young boys named Scott Johnson and Peter Hill. Scott, I believe, was the older boy, and Peter was the younger one.
Believed to be 6 and 7.
Even though on the internet there's conflicting reports. Some say they were 11, some say they were 9 and 7, but from what I could say, the median age was around 6 or 7, and they were little boys. Scott's family had recently moved to Bullhead City from California in 1973, and they thought that Bullhead City would be a better place to raise their son and their daughter. And I guess from what I recall from the article I was reading, it was April 3rd, 1974 at about 3:45 p.m.
Just remember, this is all just our opinions and just for fun.
Right. So at around 3:45 p.m. on April 3rd, 1974, the Bullhead City Volunteer Fire Department got a call about a fire at what they're calling a powder
shack, I believe.
Powder shack.
Something like that.
Used for the copper mining in the area. And inside there were the bodies of Scott Johnson and Peter Hill. Sue Johnson, Scott's mother, believes that the boys were murdered after having seen a drug deal or drug dealers in the area.
Because they found a $100 bill a couple weeks prior to around the area of it was not a powder shack, whatever thing. It was an old thing for a shooting range.
Yeah,
so.
There's conflicting reports. Some say it was for the mining. Some people say it was for skeet shooting. Either way, they were in a shack that was burned, and they were inside. And Scott's family believes that it was a murder, and Peter's family believes. So some people in Peter's family believe that it was an accidental death caused by the boys playing with matches and gasoline.
And that is the conclusion of the Bullhead City Police Department and Fire Department, that it was an accidental death. The reason why it was on Unsolved Mysteries is because the mother believed that there was something more to it. Lots of people don't understand that. On Unsolved Mysteries, if the parents wanted to or family members wanted to get their stuff on there and the show thought it was compelling enough, they would put it on there. So the police believe it was an accidental death caused by the children and not drug dealers.
And on this website I found called sitcomsonline.com, a man named Fletch, or a user named Fletch, says that there is some information that he found that was confirmed, such as that the shed as well as another building that was close to the shed were torn down a few years after the deaths of Scott and Peter. The shed used in the Unsolved Mystery segment was built by Cosgrove Muir for the filming of the segment. His second point is that the shed was not a powder magazine used by the copper miners, as Unsolved Mystery said it was. It was actually built on the site of or for an old shooting range in the 1950s and was used as a camp for Army war games in the 1960s. 3, that a local judge named Harold Purcell ordered a coroner's inquest into the death. The inquest jury consisted of people who lived in this city, like any jury pool. They pored over the police reports. One person described it as mounds and mounds of reports, viewed the bodies of the two boys at the funeral home as well as the shed itself. 4, the inquest jury concluded without a doubt that the boys died as a result of playing with matches and gasoline in the shed. There was a mattress in the shed that they may have tried to hide behind once the fire started, as the whole inside went up fast due to fumes sucking out the oxygen quickly. 5, that a 2x12 piece of wood that Larry Adams, the fire chief at the time, described in the Unsolved Mystery segment. Well, Larry Adams wasn't the fire chief at the time, but he was the fire chief at the time that Scott Johnson and Peter Hill died in 1974.
Yes, it was.
Was indeed investigated, but was determined by the inquest jury to not have been involved in the case. It was possibly something that the boys had played with at the time or before the fire.
At the time before the fire. There will be a link put in below so you can go over this information yourself.
Yeah. Number 6 was that there were upwards of 20 police officers dispatched to the scene to scour for clues and evidence. That being said, it was still determined that the boys died accidentally. And number 7, Peter Hill's mother accepted the conclusion of the inquest jury that the boys had been playing with matches and died accidentally. Excuse me. She wanted nothing to do with the Unsolved Mysteries segment and did not want to talk about what happened. And 8, the boys were both known to play with matches and fire, and allegedly Peter Hill had caused a fire at his home not too long before their death.
So they had good reason to believe that the boys more than likely went into it with some gasoline and some matches, knowing that they were misbehaving and sneaking around more than likely, went in there, opened up the gas can, not really realizing that the fumes would fill the room, and when they lit the matches, the whole room went up in a ball of flames, and they were trapped in there and had no time to react to get out. Like the mom said, she thought her son was too smart or too whatever to be trapped in a room in a fire. But if it burst into flames in a big boom and you're pushed back and knocked down and you're blocked from the door, and there's only way there's oxygen is that tiny hole, and the fire is sucking the door shut through that tiny hole in the door. And if you've watched the Unsolved Mysteries or looked it up at all, then you know there were fire marks, scorch marks on the outside of the door. That would be where the fire was sucking oxygen through that hole, and the flames were coming out of there. So they were virtually trapped in there. I mean, I'm not saying the other stuff didn't happen. She did push hard on the whole, it was a drug thing. But honestly, my opinion is, and a lot of people are probably not going to like...
Just her opinion.
Just my opinion. People aren't going to like it. But we walked 150 feet from our house, which was approximately the distance from her house to this location that the kids had been playing in. And she watched them all the time.
In her own words, she kept an eye on them at all times.
Okay, so then you didn't have your eyes on them long enough for either drug dealers to trap them in there and kill them, or for them to get gasoline and matches and go into this shack and then do that. You were not paying enough attention, and actually the fault would be negligent on the person saying that they watched them all the time. And that's just my opinion. But if you're watching them all the time, how would two people kill them? And or how would they get the gasoline and the matches and get them out there to this shack with a mattress in it and then start a fire?
Yeah.
On the mattress, more than likely, or just open the gas can and the room filled with fumes. And then they lit a match, either one of them or both.
To find where she says that.
So, it's just messed up all around. They lost their lives. We found a lot of information as we dug into this over the last 24 hours, because we live in this town and it's been plaguing me and my daughter for a number of years. Ever since I first watched it, and she's been watching Unsolved Mysteries with me her whole life. Right now I currently watch it on repeat on Pluto, not sponsored. But I watch about Scott Hill probably at least once. Scott Johnson and Peter Hill at least once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, if you continuously watch it on the Unsolved Mysteries channel on the aforementioned TV thing or streaming thing, Pluto,
or on YouTube.
Or on YouTube. So,
yeah, it says right here on the Unsolved Mysteries website, less than 50 yards. Yeah, less than 50 yards from the Johnsons' new home stood an old
150 feet.
Yeah, it says less than 50 yards from the Johnsons' new home stood an old shed once used by copper miners as a powder magazine. It became a playhouse for Scott and his friends. Sue watched them play in it. Oh, they just played there and played cops and robbers and Indians and cowboys or whatever else little boys do. I never felt any apprehension towards that building at all. It was within inside of the house. It wasn't anything to worry about. It was the typical thing that children would pick to use for a fort or a clubhouse.
They were little boys. So, of course they would. Or little girls. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I had a little shack in the back at my house when I was a kid, and I always made it into my dollhouse. So, whatever. And that's from the Unsolved Mysteries website right there. But honestly, it's a tragedy.
It's the first website that comes up when you Google Scott Johnson and Peter Hill.
It's an utter tragedy, but I feel a little bit more relieved that now I know that the case is solved.
According to
the Bullhead City Police and the fire department, it is solved and has been solved since shortly after it happened. It was an accidental death, and the reason it's a big deal is because that mother made a big deal of believing that it was something else, and it got on unsolved mysteries.
And if any of our information is wrong, you can let us know.
Please let us know in the thing, but we will have a link.
Because as far as we can tell from my research on the internet is that the case is not marked as unsolved in Bullhead City.
Where we live, it's been closed for a long time.
And if they have reopened it, they haven't said anything to the public about it. And again, it happened in 1974, so almost 50 years ago. So anybody who would have been connected to the case in any way is probably more than likely dead.
A lot of people who are involved in this case have passed away.
I don't know if any of
I'm sure the law enforcement, a lot of the law enforcement has retired or passed away.
I don't know if Larry Adams is still alive. Or last I heard, he owned a construction company in town.
And the fire department was voluntary, so it wasn't a paid one. And the reason why these didn't get a lot of news coverage is Bullhead City's in the middle of nowhere, like I said.
He owns Pueblo Construction, so I don't know if he's still alive.
And if it wasn't a big enough story to get to Phoenix, it didn't get to the news. So people didn't hear about these things that happened. Lots of things happened here because it's a tourist town. You don't hear about it. Or the fact that before a certain time, there was no news coverage in our local area. And if it wasn't a big enough story to hit Phoenix, then you didn't hear about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Larry Adams is still alive.
I don't know if he's still alive or not.
He was probably a young...
He could have been a young man at that time. You know, he could have been younger and a volunteer fireman, and he could still be alive.
He was the fire chief. He was elected in 1971 to be the fire chief.
Yeah, but still, he could have still been a younger man. It's a voluntary thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm
he was
just speculating.
According to the internet, he was elected.
Oh, so that part was elected. The rest
He's
of the
a fire
people,
chief, but it was a volunteer fire department.
Okay, so the rest of them were volunteers, not
the
him.
Bullhead City Fire Department celebrated 75 years this year, but I don't think they were a fire department like we consider until much later.
So we're just saying that I think a lot of people's confusion with this case is they think it is really an unsolved mystery when, as far as Bullhead City is concerned, it was an accidental death.
Nobody in our town really talks about it at all. I've never heard anybody talk about it.
There's no memorial.
There's no memorial for them.
There's no dedication plaques. There's no nothing.
The newspaper never talks about them.
No anniversaries of their death are ever brought up.
But then again, there are other children who have gone missing or died in our town that no one talks about. Like, we found out about a woman named Stephanie Lynn. Was it Bennett or Benson? Bennett? Stephanie Lynn. She went missing in 1989. She's never been found. She was 18.
What about the other one?
And then there was Jason Saul, I think it was. He went missing.
We're going to research more if we can, but like I said, because we're in a rural area, and if the story ain't big enough, and there wasn't a news source at the time, there was no one to get any information from.
Both Stephanie and Mr. Saul, can't remember his name, I think it's Jason. But Stephanie and Jason both went missing in the 1990s, 2 years apart. And one was in 95 and one was in 97. They were both white teenagers with strawberry blonde to red hair and had blue or hazel eyes and were around the approximate same height and weight.
Yep, and they came missing from the same area.
And then there is the unidentified skeletal remains that were found on Castleberry here in town, and she is known as Castleberry Kate.
And we want to find more about her.
And I don't remember where it was, but it was a Reddit thread where somebody thinks that she might have been a missing woman from another area that was found here, because a construction crew found Castleberry Kate's remains when they were digging to start new construction, and she's been unidentified since they found her. And
the noise you hear is my grandson playing.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're still. I hope they're still looking into her, because she's listed her and the other two missing people from our city, not just from Arizona, because I found it on NCMEC's website for missing children from Arizona. But the three that are missing from Bullhead City is the unidentified Castleberry Kate and Stephanie and Jason.
They're the ones that are missing, and one under. But also, what about the one that they said they're going to announce some information on tomorrow?
Oh, we were looking on YouTube last night for just information about about the missing
Research.
people, and we ran across a news video from one of the Phoenix news stations about how they're going to reveal. I think they're going to reveal the identity of Little Miss Nobody, who was found around Congress, Arizona, in the what was it, 62 years ago?
Yeah, 62 years ago.
She was believed to have been between the ages of 3 and 4 and murdered and then left out in the desert.
So we're going to get some information about that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
tomorrow.
on the news tomorrow. I can't remember what affiliate it is, but it is one of the local news
and
affiliates.
we're going to be
in
paying
Phoenix.
attention to that and let you guys know about that.
Because, a lot of actually unidentified Jane Does and John Does from Arizona have been identified in the last few years.
Yeah.
But a lot of people just go missing in the desert and are never found or never heard from. We actually do have a couple missing people from our area right now, 2 males who have been missing. I can't remember their names right now. One is an elderly man, I think Thomas Kirk. He's still missing. And I can't remember the other guy's name.
His nickname was Primo.
Yeah.
Everybody in town knew him as Primo.
Yeah, and he's been missing, I think, since last year.
And like I said, he was perceived to be running from somebody and went out on an ATV in the desert and hasn't been seen since.
And I'm sure if you've ever heard of Bullhead City and you've never been here or don't know the surrounding area, you might have heard about us when a little girl went missing and was found murdered not too far from her home about 8 years ago, because we made it onto HLN with Nancy Grace.
I think it was actually 7.
It's 8.
Is it 8?
7 or 8 years ago.
I believe it was 7 because I just got a
7 or 8
thing.
Remember her funeral was after. Her memorial was after.
Oh, that's right.
So it was about 7 or 8 years ago. Her name was Isabella Grogan Canella, and she was murdered. The man is in prison. But if you've heard of Bullet City and you've never been here or been to the surrounding area,
and you're into true crime, more than likely that's how you know us.
Is because we made it onto the national news because she went missing, and then they found her not too far from her home. We actually lived not too far from where she lived and where she was found.
And we want to take a walking tour from our house to the Bella Garden,
she has
which is a rock
garden
in dedication to her. And we can show you in the proximity of where she lived from the rock garden and the park where she played and she came up missing from. And it's all within walking distance.
She came up missing from her house, which was across the street from Rotary Park.
But you know what I mean? She came missing from that area right there.
Her family lived across the street from the park.
And she was always at the park playing and everything.
My mom actually knows one of her parents.
Yes.
And her father.
Went to the funeral.
I met her father.
So
he was my mom's boss back in the 90s.
Yeah. So we were going to do just like a little walking thing over there and show you the garden.
Oh, and then that Walmart guy, the one who committed that murder back in the 90s, remember? And then he kept getting the text from Walmart he thought it was the woman's name, and he drove all the way from another state to confess to the Bullhead City Police Department about how he murdered this woman back in the day.
Yeah.
With the flashlight.
We could definitely talk about him because that was nuts. That one was
if you've heard about that, the man that drove all the way across the United States because Walmart kept texting him about something. He thought it had to do with that they were onto him about how he murdered this woman back in the 1990s.
Here in town
with a flashlight over by Rotary Park.
By Rotary Park, yeah. But yeah, I want to do that.
Our town doesn't Rotary. Our town doesn't normally make it onto the news for good things, obviously.
When I moved to Rotary Park, it was just a desolate piece of.
You moved here.
Not Rotary Park. When I moved here, Rotary Park was just a big abandoned field where I just want to tell you, not nice things happened and people didn't want to go there after dark.
Mm-hmm. So but Rotary Park was down in the 1990s when he murdered that woman.
I came in the 80s and it was just a patch of dirt that people really just didn't want to go mess around with. That's where the people who went and did things and you didn't want to go mess with those people, that's where they were doing them. When I was a teenager, you didn't go there and mess with people because that was trouble.
I was going to say
then it got cleaned up and became Rotary Park.
So I say back to Scott Johnson and Peter Hill. People were actually still talking about Scott Johnson and Peter Hill when my mom moved here 10 years later in 1984, but it's probably because it was the 10-year anniversary and people were still debating in town whether or not it was an accidental death or whether it was a murder. Like, I don't know because there's
it could be
just conflicting evidence either way because the shack's reconstruction in the Unsolved Mysteries episode is not an accurate reconstruction of what the shack actually looked like and the actual location it was in.
Yeah.
They moved it to a different location, and it's not built the same. It doesn't look the same.
No. And it's just, it could be either way, but...
And if you want to know the Unsolved Mysteries episode where they talk about the shack fire, as it's called, on the internet, in the description of the episode, it is season 4, episode 16.
Yes.
Of Unsolved Mysteries.
It is. And again, like I said, my opinion is that they played with they had been in trouble for, at least one of them, for setting fires at their home, more than likely with their parents. And they like to play with matches and fire, and they were little boys. It was the 70s. I was born in 1970. I will say that by the time I was a certain age, I knew how to set a fire. I wasn't playing with fire, but I knew how to set a fire because we went camping. Things can get out of control. I didn't know that fumes build up. How do we know that they just went and go in there innocently to try to build a fire in their little play area and gathered the things to do so, took the cap off the gas can, the thing filled with fumes, and then they lit the match and it went. So, I mean, they were little kids. They were 6 and 7. Like, when I was 6 and 7, I didn't know nothing about gas fumes and the buildup inside of the air, but I didn't. I was born in the 1970. So, in 1976, yes, I
Fire safety was taught in my school.
Knew how to build a fire, but I also didn't know that if I opened up a gas can in a closed room that I would die from it. You can just die from opening a gas can in a closed room and it filling with vapors. So,
and this is why fire safety is very important. I was taught fire safety in school every year. Every year we had to go into the little trailer where the mock fire happens, and you had to jump out the window.
But this was the 70s, and that kind of stuff wasn't.
Yeah. Fire drills are very, very important.
So it's totally believable that they accidentally caused their own deaths.
My own younger brother was a little bit of a pyromaniac when we were children. He set fire to a blanket in our apartment when we were living in the neighboring city of Laughlin, Nevada.
And under that staircase, under
the staircase outside, yeah. He set two fires.
And then he got his butt whooped, and he stopped doing that.
Because it was pretty bad.
So those things are completely plausible, and not all children think. And yes, they are smart, but I'm not saying that people in the 70s, we were simple in the 70s.
Me and Adam are 11 months apart in age. If I was 7 and he was 6, and we accidentally set a fire, and it got out of control, I don't know how I would have reacted at all. I might have panicked and caused the death of both me and my younger brother because I was a child and wouldn't have known what to do in that
coping
instance.
Skills aren't that good, you know?
Children don't have good coping skills, and I can't honestly say that if he had started a fire and freaked out that he would have survived the fire because he freaked out when he set the blanket on fire and didn't know what to do.
My opinion is that it went boom and exploded, and they were thrown back, and that's why they were laying in the back of it and hit their heads, and that's why they didn't try to get out, was because the fire went boom and pushed them backwards.
I just believe either
and
way
they
it was
hit
an
their
accidental
and that's
death.
why they were on their backs, because the mom did talk about that. People did talk about
and the
the
whole
fact
thing
that
about the
they were on their
$100
backs
bill,
laying down.
Let me just say, we live in the desert, and the $100 building, because she says there's reports that they found a $100 bill outside the shed at some time before their untimely death. I have to say, out here in the desert, you can find money everywhere if you look for it.
Yeah.
When my grandparents used to go to their doctor's appointments in the 90s, and there was fencing, and we would be outside with my grandpa while one of the grandparents would be inside, one would be outside. We'd be outside playing,
looking for money on the fence,
and we found it more than once. And not just small bills like $1 bills or 5s or 20s. Sometimes
it's a gambling town across the river, and it's real windy sometimes. Yeah. So money gets ripped right out of your hands.
People still find money here in town stuck to fences. It's not that unheard of here where we live.
Wasn't it Zach that was walking out of
Zach he cashed his check at Walmart, walked outside on a windy day, and then his
$80
just blew away.
It just blew away, and it was gone.
And him and my brother just kind of watched it happen because
they couldn't chase it. It was gone.
Mm-hmm. It was just gone.
And he lost his $80. And
he was pretty upset about it.
Yeah. But
there's no point looking for it at that point.
So wind
also, my mom was like, "Why were you counting your money on a windy day outside? That's just ridiculous."
But it could have blown there.
Mm-hmm.
The money could have blown there.
And April is part of our windy season.
Weren't there casinos there at that time too?
Yeah. 1974, yeah.
So there were casinos on
I'm
the
pretty
other
sure
side
Laughlin
of
was
the
around.
river. So there would have been people with money, gambling, and things going
Also,
on.
back in the 70s, this was a very... there was one grocery store, because it's 1974, Safeway opened up in 1969 in that location where it's been the whole time. And you said it even in 1984, the city was not that big.
It was not.
It didn't extend out as far as it did. Safeway was still the only grocery store in
It was
1984.
the main area. Main
And you said Safeway was the
area.
only grocery store in 1984. Everybody shopped at Safeway. There was no other grocery store.
Yeah, for the most part, there really wasn't no other.
There was
grocery
other
store
mom
that
and
was-
pop stores, but there was no.
Yeah.
Safeway was the grocery store.
It was Safeway, Sprouts Rest, and Yellowfront. That was the thing
Mm-hmm.
in the little strip mall where the laundromat was.
That's what I mean. So it wasn't a very big town, and we've always had a more transient population of people who come and vacation here for part of the year.
Desmond, behave. Stop making so much racket, please. Thank you.
Yeah, like we still have a very transient population. We're around 40,000 or so people here, but for part of the year, it's people who are what considered snowbirds, who come for the winter, and then we get the tourists that come in from everywhere else during the summertime.
So we're a real big tourist
Hold on.
area. Really big. She
Oh.
has to take a call.
What's up? Right.
It's her boyfriend.
I love you. When she's a mention. Forever time. To a female. No. No, no.
It's a nightly ritual. It's perfectly acceptable and okay.
But yeah, we still have a very transient population now.
We still do. A very big homeless
Mm-hmm.
and people who come and go. Like
Yeah.
she said, not just homeless people, but people who come
And
and
go.
go. Like we said, we have people who called snowbirds and they own homes here and then they own homes in other places. And when it gets too cold there, they come here.
And then we get the tourists that come in from all over the country and all from other countries that come in during the summertime.
Yeah.
Because we're so
All over the world.
We're on the Colorado River. We're 90 miles from Las Vegas, around 70-ish miles from Lake Havasu City. Like,
And so it's very touristy, and that's
Mhm.
why you don't hear about a lot of the missing and dead in our area because they don't want to run off the tourists. They don't talk about how many people die on the river, which
is a lot.
is a lot.
When we lived in a different part of town, a dead girl's a woman, a young teenager who had drowned. Her body washed up on the beach not too far from where we were living.
Yeah.
And my brother had seen her just the day before, and they went tubing, and I think they had been drinking, and she fell off of her tube and drowned. And they found her, but she was like stuck to the dock, right?
Yeah.
The current had pulled her up to the dock, and they found her the next morning drowned.
Yeah, up underneath the dock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't talk about those kind of things, and they have been here all the time. People go missing, people die. Last year, we had a woman who went missing while jogging with a group of people. She went missing, ran off. They're saying she died from a
They're saying
heat-related
that she
incident, but then
wandered
nobody
off,
went
but-
and looked for her. Nobody in her running group went and looked for her. And she was found not too long after, but it's still the point that they're
She was in a
with
group.
of people, and
You think you're safe in a group, but
And
then
she
you're
went missing and
nobody
died
went
in the
looked for
desert.
her. I mean, nobody in her group was like, "Hey, so
And
and so ain't with us anymore.
my-
Maybe we should double back and find
my
her."
boyfriend is friends with her son. Like,
and you don't hear about that.
no, about how many people out here drown on the river, how many people
Or
out
get
here
Overtaken by the heat in the desert.
or like,
You can get so disorientated and be less than a mile from town, and you can't see town, and then you don't know where it's at, and you're going the wrong
exactly.
way.
And we do live in what's considered a rural area, even though we are. It's also considered a micropolitan area because we have an accumulated. I think it's because we have an accumulated population of over a certain amount within the neighboring areas of where we live. But we are considered to be a rural community within Arizona.
Yeah.
Because we don't live... I pretty much consider everywhere outside of the Phoenix metropolitan area to be rural. Because Phoenix is the biggest city and most of the stuff is located in the greater Phoenix area. But up here where we live, everything is... It's rural. We have farms on the outskirts of town. We have...
Come here.
You know, it's just a rural area that gets
Come here.
tourists, and no
Desi,
one
come
wants
here.
to talk about what happens. They don't want to lose the tourism. They don't want to lose the tourist dollars. That's why you don't hear about all the stuff that happens in Las Vegas, because they don't want you to know the seedy underbelly of what's happening
Off the strip.
Yeah, and on the strip. They don't want you to know. And this, like, the Laughlin Bullhead area doesn't want you to know all the seedy things that happen here in town because people wouldn't want to come.
They don't even talk about that little boy who disappeared from this area, who got away from his mom from this area with the one with autism or
and
whatever.
drowned.
And he ended up at Rotary Park. Again, Rotary Park. He ended up at Rotary Park playing in the water, and all the other people there thought he was with somebody else, and then just left him there playing. And he ended up swept away by the river.
And they found him the
drowned.
next day. They found him the next morning.
Yeah.
When people had been scouring that part of town, Rotary Park, for hours.
But actually,
Nobody went near the water where he was.
Nobody, apparently, and
he was known to have a fascination with the water.
They also went to another area where his phone was the mother's phone was supposedly something or other. I don't remember all the details. Again, these are all just what we remember, our opinions. This is all for fun. But nobody even talks about that little boy anymore.
Yeah, no.
They don't even talk.
And that happened in the last 3 years.
When we go to Bella's garden, you'll see that nobody does anything with her garden anymore. Nobody talks about it. Like I said, the anniversary just happened. There was no mention of it in our local paper.
And for the first couple of years, they would mention her
all the
at the anniversary of her death. And again, it's just like everything else. Eventually, the memory fades, and nobody really wants to talk about it anymore because, well,
I'll be shocked.
It is a hard subject to talk about. It is the death of a child.
I'll be shocked if the gardens kept up. But the last time I walked past it, it was not.
Yeah, the last time we went by it, it did not look the way it did before.
It did not.
It's like many things here in our town. It starts out great, and then nobody wants to do the maintenance and the upkeep on it, so they don't, and it just falls apart.
Plus, when we had the regatta ending up at at Rotary Park, the people were trampling through it and then just taking all the rocks out of the rock garden, not realizing that they weren't meant for you.
They weren't the painted rocks at the time that everyone was trading
for you
or
to take.
finding.
They would say "leave in the garden for Bella" on the back of them, but people still
it wasn't part of that rock
painting,
rock hiding, rock hunting phase thing. It was just a rock garden.
Everybody went through. It was a rock garden, and it said "do not remove the rocks."
All the rocks in the garden said "do not remove"
for Bella.
People, the tourists, and some locals were just allowing their children and other people to just take the rocks,
or were just taking them so they'd have like a piece of memorabilia from it. Like
it's
macabre,
and you don't need a piece of memorabilia from the site from the memorial of a child.
I don't put it past people though. Again, my opinion. I don't put it past some of the tourists and people who had heard about Bella. What cat? Our cat? Okay, where is it at?
Behind the table. I don't know what it's doing.
I don't put it past people. Sorry, my cat's misbehaving. I do not put it past people to take it as memorabilia. People who saw it on like Nancy Grace or because it hit national news. We're getting ready to be done, I know. That they didn't just go to that garden and come here and just take one of those rocks because it was a piece of memorabilia, because there were many times that in the beginning of it lots of people were taking lots of rocks and her family was getting very upset.
I just wish we'd make it to the news for better things.
Oh gosh, yes.
It really sucks when your city only makes it to the news when bad things happen.
I personally know someone who was third in the nation at something, but y'all don't know anything about him because unless you were involved in the thing, it didn't make the news. And that was a positive thing in Bullhead City. I mean, Bullhead City, and some kid from Bullhead City was third in the nation and could have almost went to the international thing, but didn't. Still, y'all didn't hear about that, and that's an absolutely positive thing.
But we're going to do more videos talking about stuff like this. Probably do more, hopefully, in-depth videos where we talk about one subject at a time and not a bunch of different things.
We talked about them, and we talked about the upcoming things.
But maybe soon we'll do, like, one subject per video so that it's just... We'll get better. We're new at this, so just give us some time, and hopefully we'll get more people to enjoy listening to us. But we're going to wrap it up for now because it's rather late here, and... my nephew is
running around making a bunch of noise.
So we're gonna wrap it up here, and hopefully we'll be able to do another video tomorrow and get that other stuff done that we talked about earlier. But if not, we'll be back soon.
She's going to her boyfriend's for a couple of days, and we'll be back on Saturday.
Yeah, so hopefully we will get some more videos up. We're gonna just give us some time, just hang in there. we're going to try to start keeping the videos under 30 minutes. We're a little bit over 30 minutes right now, but so just, I guess, give us some time, and hopefully we'll get better with this, and we'll be able to talk about
extra time was for editing.
I know. So, but just stick it out with us until we get it all figured out, hopefully. But
I'm just gonna keep plugging away at it, though.
So that's what everyone says to do. Just keep going. So I guess we'll see you in the next one, and have a good night. Bye.
Bye.